Comments were deeply offensive. This is a terrible lapse of judgment by Mr. Chiang. He has apologized for those comments.
Well, it is a teachable moment. It teaches us that Mark Carney will never stand up for Canada. If Mark Carney won't stand up for a Canadian against this foreign hostile regime now, how could we ever expect him to stand up for Canada after the election?
For Mark Carney to say that I'm going to accept this candidate really sends a message that that type of commentary ultimately is acceptable. But he's putting his party ahead of his country in that case. I think that's wrong.
Liberal leader Mark Carney is defending a GTA incumbent candidate condemned by the Conservatives and the NDP. Paul Chiang is running as the Liberal incumbent in Unionville, north of Toronto. At a Chinese language press conference 3 months ago, Chiang said about his Conservative rival at the time, if anyone here can take him to the Chinese Consulate General in Toronto, you can get the $1 million reward. In December, Hong Kong authorities announced a bounty for information leading to Tay's arrest. Tay is an advocate for democracy in Hong Kong and critic of China's national security laws there. Chiang, for his part, has apologized for his comments in two separate posts on social media. But Joe Tay says that's not enough, releasing this statement, which reads in part, Mark Carney must fire Paul Chiang as the Liberal candidate for Unionville. His threatening public comments were intended to intimidate me, and they must not be tolerated. I want to be clear, he went on to say, no apology is sufficient. Let's talk about this with our front bench, former senior advisor to the Liberal Ontario governments of Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne. Dan Moulton is here. He's now a partner with Crestview Strategy. Shakir Chambers is a vice president at Ouster Group. He worked in Prime Minister Stephen Harper's office before becoming a policy advisor to the International Trade Minister. Kathleen Monk is the former director of communications to the late Jack Layton. She's now the principal owner of Monk & Associates. And Laura Stone rounds us out tonight. She's a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody.
Hey
Happy
there.
to have everyone together on this Monday. Kathleen, I'll start with you as a veteran of campaigns. Are you surprised that they are standing by this candidate, that Mr. Carney specifically is standing by this candidate?
So this is the interesting part about campaigns. So putting aside, obviously, the comments are deplorable. That the idea that you would say to a community, hey, take my political opponent and go deliver him to a foreign government. Like, it is ultimately disqualifying. And, much can be said about how the Conservatives, have failed in foreign interference, Liberals, everyone, even, everyone can be to blame. But from a political perspective, a strategy perspective, it is fascinating to watch this. How long will the Liberals hold on to this candidate, right? Like, that's what how are they framing up the argument? What tactics are the Conservatives and New Democrats using against the Liberals? We've seen a letter to the RCMP commissioner that would take it a next level of an investigation being launched. But really, you've got to look at the timeline. I mean, the Liberals right now have till April 7th. That's the deadline. That's what we all are watching for when all candidates' names are locked onto the ballot. So I kind of think, watching this as a campaign, I'm like, who can take the punches the longest? Will Carney and the Liberals survive till Wednesday on this issue, or will they have to fold? Because by Wednesday or Thursday, they're going to have to make the decision. We've got to, cut bait, get rid of this candidate. It's too much, we're taking on too much water, essentially. And we have to move on and appoint a new candidate, which they can do by the weekend, and have that new name on the ballot. But this is often what happens in campaigns, where it's like your campaigns are tested. How long will you circle the wagons around a candidate, protect them, or when you decide to just cut loose and say, no, this is too much of a problem? And I've been on both sides, where I've been in front of the camera having to defend candidates that literally just a couple hours later were thrown under the bus. And it's painful. It is really painful. But, you're forged in fire in those moments. But I actually think that, Carney, in his neophyte political way, doesn't realize, maybe potentially the people around him, that it would be much easier to cut Paul Chiang loose. And in this context of foreign interference and all the things we discussed, there's no tolerance for this on behalf of Canadians.
Well, even that's what's so interesting to me, Dan, is that even though Mr. Carney himself doesn't have political experience, he is surrounded by some of the most experienced Liberals in the fray, who I can only imagine would be saying what Kathleen just did, right? Like the sort of cost-benefit analysis is pretty easy, particularly ahead of the nomination deadline, right? What do you think is perhaps going on?
Well, I think they've decided that they can get past this, that an apology will suffice. Kathleen's right. I mean, you have candidate gaffes in every election. I've been involved in my share of campaigns that have had serious candidate gaffes, that you've had to either dump the candidate or say an apology is enough. Clearly, they're sorry, and we're going to move past this. in this case, they've clearly said, okay, he's apologized. It was a reprehensible comment. We don't obviously support it, don't agree with it, but an apology is going to suffice here, and we're going to be able to move past this. Kathleen mentions Wednesday of this week is sort of a reasonable timeline that they have to make that call. Frankly, first of all, I don't think it'll be in the news tomorrow. I think this will move out of the cycle pretty quickly. I think we've reached peak of this story. And the reality is on Wednesday, our news cycle is going to be dominated with far more pressing matters regarding tariffs from the U.S. White House. And so I think just the reality of the political news cycle here, this is going to have run its course. They've decided an apology is enough, and they'll move past it pretty quickly. And I think it's the strategic decision they've made to not give this story any more oxygen by firing the guy.
Yeah, and I do take the point, particularly, I mean, I'm not naive, Shakir. Wednesday is obviously, if there's 3 million, 7 million tariffs that are thrown our way from Donald Trump, clearly that's going to dominate the news cycle. But I would sort of add the caveat that even today, right, all weekend, Liberals were telling me this is one of our marquee policy announcements. Like, they really wanted to put forth this housing plan as something that went well beyond anything the previous government did and was a distinguishing factor between Mark Carney and his predecessor. It was completely eclipsed by questions about this story and even news stories out of the press conference this morning.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's one of the issues they'll face. You know, today, tomorrow, the messages they try to drive will get drowned out by this candidate. But I have to agree with Dan. I mean, this story, I don't think has that much legs, right? I think in 48 hours or 36 hours, once Trump starts talking about tariffs, I don't think any media outlet's going to be talking about this story. I think the only thing that might drive this forward is some, diaspora groups who might be talking about this, or as Kathleen said, that RCMP investigation that might get launched, given the letter from, I think it was Hong Kong Watch, that wrote to the RCMP commissioner. But I think as a general narrative driving forward, I think the Carney campaign has made a calculation that it has limited life cycle, it has limited legs, and they can withstand another day of just answering these questions, kind of deflecting these questions, and then getting into Wednesday where, Mark Carney is very likely to be in front of a podium looking like a prime minister, talking about the response to tariffs, and this story is kind of just in the background.
I guess the one thing I would just say is that from a campaign perspective, overall, every party's spending around $36 million on this campaign, roughly. And every day that they're talking about this candidate, it's costing the campaign $1 million. So to not move off and to just bank on Trump and tariffs taking it over when it is essentially they're saying, bring your political opponent over to a foreign government, it is deplorable.
All right, Laura, last word to you on this.
I don't think the story is going away. I don't think Mr. Carney understands the tenaciousness of two reporters named Robert Fife and Stephen Chase, who have been leading the charge on foreign interference. Fife's like a dog with a bone. I mean, you can't just give him a little piece of kibble and he'll go away. Look, I think the danger with this story is, sorry, Bob, for comparing you to that animal, my favorite kind of animal. I don't think the story is going away, and I think it's very serious because it completely undercuts Mr. Carney's criticism of Pierre Poilievre over this issue of foreign interference and security clearance. And he's out kind of trying to beat his chest saying, well, I have my security clearance and Pierre Poilievre doesn't, when there is, ostensibly kind of a version of foreign interference within his own party, sitting right there for everyone to see. You don't need to get your security clearance to hear what Paul Chiang said. I can't for the life of me understand why the Liberals are accepting this own goal on themselves. I think every time, it might kind of fade a little bit in the next couple of days and the fallout from the Trump tariffs, absolutely. But I think every time that this issue is brought up again, the issue of China's influence and interference, I think it's going to be hanging around in the background until the Liberals dump this candidate, and I'd be shocked if he makes it into the election. So I'm actually just really surprised and baffled as to why the Liberals haven't dealt with this and are letting it linger. And I don't think this will go away because it has so many repercussions for serious issues that are going to be brought up over the next month as the campaign continues.